Hey everybody, Patrick Connor here, and welcome to the Knuckles and Gloves podcast. Got a special kind of history sort of podcast for you today. As you can see, I'm here with my boy Brin-Jonathan Butler, author, filmmaker, just kind of boxing trainer to the stars, as we all know, right, Brin? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, Lennox Lewis, Riddick Bowe, something about that 1990s boxing, dude. It's a lot of fun. And it's also kind of a special twinge of nostalgia for people right about our age, between about 35 and 45-ish. Uh, Fond memories of that kind of 1990s heavyweight era. And there's a lot of shenanigans. So this is just a small slice of those shenanigans from the late 80s kind of moving into the 90s, you know?
I think it's arguably the greatest fight that didn't happen in the 90s.
It's a big
It's
one.
it's a big one. I mean, you got a handful of other ones. I mean, we talked about Foreman and Tyson in that era, but Bowe at his best looked so spectacular in that first fight against Holyfield, and sort of like Joshua against Klitschko. We never saw that guy again. He just disappeared. I guess that's true of Tyson also with Spinks. That guy never came back again, even though he was only 21 years old. So if you're going to go resumes, this is not an interesting discussion. This is pretty straightforward. But if you talk stylistically and you talk about them in their primes, then it becomes a lot more interesting. And before we began recording, even looking at the amateur fight that they had in the Olympic gold final, it was a lot more competitive than I remembered it. And I think even that is going to kind of inform our discussion, as Bowe got a hell of a lot better than he was back then.
Yeah, that's what's really interesting about this was there was kind of only a fairly small portion of time where they actually were going to fight, and they both did a lot of developing right before our very eyes, in different ways too. So that's part of what makes this discussion fairly interesting. So I mean, starting off, both Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis, very, very good amateurs. And as we know, when it comes to the heavyweight division, if you have a younger fighter who you think is probably going to be a heavyweight one day, they have the size, the stature, the body type, whatever, or you see their dad, and their dad's like 6'7", fucking 240 or something, and you're like, well, got something here. They jump, they pounce, they are predators. I mean, sometimes in multiple ways on a lot of younger fighters looking to make them heavyweight champions. Both Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis were no exception to that, to the point where Lennox Lewis had even sparred with Mike Tyson when he was fairly young as a teen, and got some, of course, according to him, brief sage wisdom from Customato. And so, I mean, Riddick Bowe similarly, very big name amateur, and both of these guys were groomed, for lack of a better word, put on the trajectory, however you want to say it, to be heavyweight champions.
Yeah, and I kind of love that both of these guys have such sages in their corner, in terms of eventually you're going to have Emmanuel Stewart in Lennox's, which transforms him into the most optimized version that we ever saw. And Eddie Futch was saying that Riddick Bowe was the most talented fighter that he ever worked with. And I believe he kind of said that he might go down as one of the great heavyweights ever.
At one point he did, yeah, probably before he knew better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's another thing we're going to run into here is Lennox really only had one fight. I mean, there's a couple with some issues, but really one fight where he showed up and he wasn't in shape, and that was his last against Vitaly Klitschko, and he still managed to pull that out. I think we've talked about that fight before. I kind of think Lennox was getting the better of Klitschko at the end. It wasn't just the cuts that stopped it, even though, to be fair, Klitschko was ahead on the scorecards, and I'm a huge Klitschko fan. But, Lennox's discipline throughout his career, both mentally and physically, is one of the things that I think allows him to be discussed as maybe the greatest heavyweight ever by a lot of experts, or certainly one of the great heavyweights ever. Certainly never a fan favorite. There was always issues with him there. I mean, he fought for Canada in the Olympics.
I was going to ask you about that. I was going to say, you need to address that, Brent. As a Canadian, you need to talk about this.
Well, it was very frustrating. I mean, I was 9 years old when he won the gold, and there was this thought of like, okay, now he just disappeared. I mean, he's in Toronto, all his training, all his amateur fights. I mean, these guys' amateur records, the best that I could find was Bowe was 104-18 and Lennox was 85-9 as amateurs. So they're real standouts. And Tyson didn't even make the Olympic team because of Henry Tillman defeating him twice in the amateurs. Tyson was a very, very good amateur, and I think he was a junior world champion. But it's interesting to think that these guys were the ones who were elevated, and rightly so. I mean, they both have huge weapons in their game, and yet Bowe just, it was always a thing about discipline. I think that was raised from the beginning, that he was just a guy that had a tremendous amount of ability, but maybe you could see him as kind of like, this is like Shaquille O'Neal versus Kobe Bryant in terms of ability to discipline, with what Lennox is to Bowe. I don't think Bowe is as dominating as Shaq was. I'm not suggesting that, but he was a monster. He, a guy 6'5" who could punch, who had, just a great kind of mental toughness to come back. Like if somebody was hitting him, he poured it on, and he was even better when he was angry or when the chips were down. And that's true in the Olympic fight against Lennox too. He takes some shots, but then he starts trading in a way that's reminiscent of Evander Holyfield. Probably most of the severe brain damage that he suffered is from the Galata fight, but that's another one where if you're not in that mentally, you would have given up years before he did in both of those fights, because he takes a savage beating in both of those fights. But then you have not the counterfactual, but the adjacent issue of how easily Lennox Lewis dispensed with Galata. So some of the resume comparisons here of the same opponents that they fought, I think it's useful to discuss how that might inform how their fight would have gone. But then again, you just don't know how their styles would have gelled as they got better in the professional ranks. And I think both of us are kind of talking about the most likely time when they should have fought was 1993, Halloween of 92. Lewis beats Riddick Bowe, and he's set up to have a big championship fight. 2 weeks later, Bowe defeats Holyfield and wins the title off him in one of the great heavyweight fights in history. That's where everything kind of goes downhill in these two colliding the way everybody was hoping. So we could talk about that, and we could also talk about that Bowe versus the best version of Lewis, which I think came a little later with Emmanuel Stewart really refining his game and just creating this optimized version, which was not, as we mentioned, like the most fan-friendly version, just as sort of Vladimir Klitschko, that style, once he was working with Stewart, definitely alienated a lot of American fans. But Jesus, it was a formidable thing to contend with, that kind of power and patience and size.
Yeah, no question. And I mean, I think that we also, like you said, the different kind of rates of development that makes this interesting too. But so going back, you mentioned their amateur record. I guess we could just talk about their amateur fight real quick. Some kind of misconceptions regarding it and whatnot. I mean, it almost seems kind of silly to go back and score or rewatch a round and a half amateur fight, but it only took a couple minutes, and you just use your eyes. It's not that crazy. It doesn't take a whole lot of analysis or anything like that, in my opinion. And I think that it's actually much better abridged fight, but a much better fight than I think is kind of remembered by the consensus. So again, it's kind of a weird situation where a lot of people, especially if you remember boxing in the 90s, Lennox Lewis was a British heavyweight. That was kind of how he was marketed. That's what the confusion was about this, representing Canada in the Olympics and representing Canada.
And his accent got a lot more pronounced.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though we've had a lot of Canadians, Justin Bieber, Ryan Gosling, they don't sound very Canadian, even though they're from a region that has the more stereotypical Canadian accent, which is not where I'm from. But Gosling sounds like 1950s Brando, like On the Waterfront Brando. That is not how they talk on the East Coast of Canada. A lot of these guys develop accents because they're embarrassed by a Canadian accent, which is understandable, because if I slip into anything a Canadianism, I am instantly mocked, since I've been in the US for 14 years.
it is easy to kind of spot or to hear whatever, but it doesn't bother me. But I do hear it a lot. I do hear the mockery for sure. Um, but that's definitely kind of strange. I think not just for you as a young Canadian, but for a lot of people at the time who knew him perhaps from the Olympics or as an amateur as a Canadian. Then all of a sudden he was getting a fairly heavy push with Kelly Maloney as a Brit, and so that was kind of, and I mean a lot of in a lot of ways that was genius because I mean look at him now in retrospect, fairly beloved. A lot of people miss him, and it stood out. At the time, a lot of people thought it was boring. A lot of people didn't like his personality, etc. But it worked for him career wise. And so, in any case, like I said, amateur, strange, Canada, etc. But obviously a big standout along with Riddick Bowe, who was from not far from where Mike Tyson was from, in Brooklyn, New York. And so basically, as these two finally meet in the Olympic super heavyweight final in 1988, Riddick Bowe with his massive Jerry curl fro, that
Yeah.
gets, and, one of the things that really stood out to me as this fight started was just how much muscle Lennox Lewis had packed on in the last few years of his career and how gangly he looked earlier on in his career. Not even so much gangly, but light on his feet. He
Yeah.
moved in a totally different way. And that's actually something that Manuel Stewart just almost eliminated from his game. He got him to be far more patient with his feet. And I think that also kind of got him into trouble a little bit in this first round, which was, I mean, way better than I remember anyway. I've watched it a few times, but it's been some time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like he's trying to dunk on him. The way he's coming out with left hooks, it's just like I'm viciously going to overpower you. And at first, Bowe is a little bit passive, trying to feel him
Yeah, it looks
out.
like it's going to work at first.
It does, and you're right. He is bigger. I mean, he's got a longer reach than Bowe. Lewis has an 84-inch reach. Bowe has it's listed differently, but like 80 inches kind of thing. So that's always weird for big guys that they're more in range than they're used to with typical opponents. And at this time, 6'5" is a little unusual. It was sort of the new era of what heavyweight was going to become the standard era. It wasn't quite then.
Or, the flip side, which is, of course, somebody who's big and then facing somebody bigger. And they're like, wow, I'm really not used to this. You know what I mean?
Too. Yeah, I mean, the only other obvious example of people this size was Teofilo Stevenson in the 70s, who was also 6'5" and kind of similar frame in some respects to Lewis. Also just that cannon of a right hand.
Yeah, very skilled.
And Felix Sabona's around at this time
Mhm.
too, who's another guy who's 6'4". I think for a long time he was fighting at 200 pounds, which standing next to that man thinking that he was weighing in at 200 pounds is one of the great physical feats that I've ever been witness to in person, because his hand was twice the size of my hand.
And I
I mean,
mean, there's video of him. It's not like it's some mystery. Imagining that guy at like the cruiserweight limit now, holy shit.
no, I mean, just I mean, talking to fighters who've known him from like who fought him, I should say, Shannon Briggs, Michael Bant, they're just kind of like that was one of the rare things in life to be in the same ring as somebody who was that kind
Stopped
of
David Tua, albeit young David Tua, but still
yeah
stopped him.
in half a round and not even a particularly powerful shot.
Yeah,
Like I mean,
just
like
kind of a
off
check
balance.
hook. Yeah, kind of
Yeah,
a
yeah, off balance. So we're just saying it was unusual to have guys 6'4", 6'5", and just naturally walk around at 220, 230. These guys are obviously going to get a lot bigger over time. Lewis in a good way, Bowe not so much. Bowe didn't really have a huge upper body frame or really lower body frame either. He was always kind of a little gangly, but clearly a monster puncher and with beautiful punch selection for a guy his size. Uppercuts on the inside as a big man fighting on the
very
inside.
surprising combination punching from a guy that size.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of similar to Tyson Fury, where it's just people are not used to having somebody that big be that agile and just sort of relaxed and can throw in combination 3, 4, 5 punches, sort of thing. Bowe had beautiful punch selection and vicious. Like, I mean, like if you'd hit him, he was going to come back with 3 or 4 things. And he had a very, very good chin. Also, I mean, that's another thing when we're categorizing these two guys. Lewis I think Lewis had a very good chin also. Lewis fought a lot of big punchers. Ray Mercer, he took some shots even from Tyson.
Way better chin than he gets, advertised
Yeah.
as having.
Well, I mean, watch the Vitaly Klitschko fight where he's out of shape and really tired. He's taking some monster shots. And
Even
yeah,
the
he gets
knockouts, those are big shots,
huge shots. Yeah, like I mean, they would have put away anybody. The two shots, the McCall. I mean, they're both freak shots. Those are not fights that he
Yeah,
was
like
losing.
full power wound up, bang, like
Yeah,
that's
full body
not
weight.
not to no excuse. He got caught with him, but point is those shots probably knock out most heavyweights.
Yeah, and I mean Oliver McCall threw that punch like somebody trying to win the half court shot at a halftime show. I mean, like his eyes were closed. He wasn't looking at all where he was going, but they landed cleanly, and
Yep.
Lewis was making some mistakes defensively. He was not responsible. Also, kind of interesting. I want to point out both these guys in the amateurs lost to Jorge Luis Gonzalez, where you're going to have a really fun match in the pros with Bowe. I think at that time Gonzalez was still undefeated, but he was touted as this amateur phenom in league with Stevenson and Sabone and all of that, and he absolutely had an incredible amateur record. Did
He
not,
had some very good amateur wins. Yeah.
yeah, huge. Lewis lost to Gonzalez as well, but also lost to Terrell Biggs in 1984 and lost to Razor Ruddock in the amateurs. So he definitely, I think he avenged both of those in his pro career handily. Um, but also, I thought it was interesting. I rewatched Lewis and Frank Bruno, and he had a lot more trouble in that fight than I remembered. Because nobody holds up Frank Bruno as some bastion of heavyweight supremacy. I mean, so it's kind of interesting. Also, Ray Mercer, he really struggled with a lot more than I remembered. So yeah, in this fight, I mean, the first round, I totally agree with you. Lewis just pours it on early, in a very uncharacteristic way. I mean, he's just gambling. I'm just going to blow you out. And then Bowe starts countering, and he is highly effective. He's also a very accurate puncher. With this punch selection, he lands a lot. And Bowe starts landing some of his incredible uppercuts. I love the way he throws uppercuts too. He gets so much leverage on them, even though he's not like a very lower body guy. Just the torque he gets on them. And Lewis begins to look very flustered, and by the end of the round, looks lethargic. So you're sort of like, I gave the first round to Bowe. I don't know about you, but in the second round, Lewis comes out, and Lewis, the way you do see him in the pros, when he wants to close the show, as he did against Rahman, as he did against Galata, big number of people, very, very few people have ever been able to stand up to that kind of onslaught with what he brings to the table.
Yeah, I had very similar notes. I mean, there's a bit going on in the fight, but what I also noted kind of seemed to change the tide or mess around with the momentum a little bit was the referee, dude. I mentioned this before we started recording, but you're very familiar with the differences in the amateur system, especially then. The gap has closed a little bit now between the amateurs and the pros as far as what the fights actually look like and whatnot. They used to look a lot more like the pros, and then for a few decades looked totally just like something else. And this was during that time period. Referees are very quick to stop fights. They're very quick to take points. They're very quick to jump in, give warnings, etc. And the referee that was working this fight did a lot of warnings, did a lot of talking, and did a lot of, I think what Riddick Bowe was doing, and this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. He was ducking, which in the pros is it man, we've had a lot of discussions in recent weeks with the Usyk fight about like infractions and fouls and regulations and stuff like that. And a lot of the pro regulations come from the amateur game. There, a lot of them are based on like the old NCAA, which I don't even think does boxing anymore, but now the amateur system. And in any case, ducking your head below a certain level, even in the pros, is a foul. You can't do it. And basically, the only way to deal with it is if a ref doesn't stop it, it's like it's a fair target. You
Yeah.
duck your head down that low and you get hit, that's your ass and that's your fault. And so, in any case, here Riddick Bowe was ducking his head down. Was it excessive? to me, no. The referee apparently thought it was excessive, started getting on his ass about it, and that to me seemed like the catalyst for Bowe to, light a fire under his ass and start getting offensive and start attacking Lewis. Like he jumped forward through like a wicked body shot combination. It was like 6 shots, bam, 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 bam. Lewis was backing up, and it was at first Bowe looked overwhelmed, then Lewis started kind of looking overwhelmed. And then at the very end of the round, it almost looked like Bowe was either frustrated or tired because the ref jumped in again, threatened to take a point and all this kind of stuff. And then I actually did take a point away for a headbutt, or at least that's what the commentator said, but I think it was the lowering of the head. That's what the whole issue was. Got a point taken away, and then Lennox Lewis landed a jab and a right hand right at the bell. I mean, Bowe didn't really look hurt so much. It just looked, he didn't look quite like he did during that stretch where he was almost kicking Lennox's ass for a moment.
Yeah.
Not quite that far, but he was doing very, very well. So it looked like Bowe kind of had this in hand after the first round. That's what it looked like anyway.
Yeah, and then Lewis starts landing these right hands that are clearly, I guess, the most generous interpretation would be destabilizing Bowe. But he looks badly off balance as a result of these shots. Now, to be fair, we've seen Bowe take huge punishment from Galata, from Holyfield and stuff. Clearly, he can take a punch. Clearly, he can come back. But as you mentioned, at this time, referees, it takes very, very little in the amateur game to standing 8 count, to issue a standing 8 count, or to kind of break it up. I think the referee was a little excessive here. I think the stoppage is also a little excessive. Is it way out of the norm for where amateur boxing was? No, it's not. Like, no. I'm not in any way saying it's a scandal. Like, that's a kind of ridiculous claim. Bowe could have just as easily fought that aggressive too, and taking those chances to land huge shots. I think the referee would have done the same thing, but he took them, and the tide was definitely turning towards Lewis. Was trying to make a statement. He achieved that. You wish it would have had a chance to go on a little bit longer, because of course we don't get to see them ever as pros again, but that's what we have, is this little, as you say, like abridged microcosm of what it might have been.
And again, I think that it challenges just watching it, taking 5-10 minutes, whatever, to watch it, not even 10 minutes, 5 minutes to watch it, challenges what the general narrative is over what happened, that Lennox kicked his ass. All you see is the RSC, the referee stop contest, or the amateur version of the TKO. And so you don't get to see what actually happened. And there have been numerous occasions where there were amateur fights where a dude was stopped and he didn't even look hurt at all. Like not even remotely. It was just that he took a shot. It made him pause for a moment, and the ref goes, whoa, 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 whoa. And yeah, you do want to see him erring on the side of caution for sure. But there's fucking levels to it here, bro. And so yeah, I agree that I think that this stoppage was in line with what you would normally see in amateur fights during this period. So it's not an atrocity or anything like that, but it definitely, you wish it would have gone a little bit longer, just a little bit. However, one thing pointed out by the commentating team, and I do agree with and did take note of myself, is that Riddick Bowe didn't seem to be protesting too hard, and neither were his team. So,
no, Bowe did not seem to enjoy fighting Lennox Lewis. That's like, when you rewatch it, he does not have the demeanor like, I need to prove something here. And it's interesting. I don't know why I have that immediate inference from watching him, but I was not surprised when he dumps the WBC title in the garbage and doesn't want to fight him. It always seemed a fair appraisal that he was ducking him, and I think it legitimately is a stain on his career, on his legacy. Because if he had shown that, now also 1995, he did sign a deal to fight Lennox Lewis finally. Unfortunately, Oliver McCall came out of nowhere with that half-court shot of a right hand to knock Lewis out. So there it went. And it's a really interesting era, because we've talked about it before, but I mean, there's so many parallels with what we've seen with this current crop of excellent fighters, where we've had a handful of the fights that we were hoping to see. But I think when we look back, we're going to, in a similar way to the 90s, dwell a little more on the fights we didn't get than the ones we did, because the politics of the
There's a
sport.
couple big ones.
Yeah, and not just them happening, but when they should have happened. It's frustrating, like I don't want to see in the news that Andy Ruiz is going to fight Deontay Wilder, because how many fights does Wilder have left? I want to see Joshua. Like,
Yeah.
how long has it been? This would be such a thrilling fight. It would make so much money for people, and I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, there are so many between Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, uh Deontay Wilder, and I'm not assigning blame to anybody in particular. I'm simply saying all of these entities, between all of them together, there's so many like extenuating fucking asterisks and all this shit that you can't really firmly expect any particular fight to happen, which really sucks. And but I mean, again, going back to this 90s era, this is a pretty big missed opportunity. And I think that obviously when you say some fighter ducked another fighter, the knee jerk reaction, especially from a lot of fans and a lot of pundit type writers and whatnot, to go, "Whoa, you're calling that guy? You're saying he's afraid? You're saying he's afraid? Okay, you think fighters are afraid? Nah, dude. You can say that a fighter avoided another fighter, and it has nothing to do with fear. It has nothing to do with like, ooh, I don't want to fight him.
No, it's a
No,
practical
it's a
decision.
pain in the ass. You don't
Yeah,
want to face this pain in the ass and not get paid what perhaps you want to get paid for it, right or wrong. And
well,
I
yeah.
mean,
I,
and
I,
we
I mean,
obviously agree. We want fighters to get as much money as possible for as little punishment as possible. But you also have to, call it what it is.
yeah, and every big fight here it's not a playoff game for these guys. It's the Super Bowl, and very likely, if you lose and you lose bad, you're badly damaged, or you're embarrassed, or your stock plummets as a result. There's no coming back from it. Whereas what you could do, sort of a la Tyson out of jail, is fight a bunch of nobodies, sell the fight with publicity, and make 20-25 million dollars per fight. And really, there's no economic penalty for doing it. Like, if you have a bum of the month club, but you're still knocking them out in sort of memorable ways, and giving the media what it wants in terms of red meat and great quotes and that sort of stuff. Uh,
You
you
could
know,
fight Francis Ngannou.
yeah, right. And yeah, and Tyson Fury is doing the same thing. And why not? Because Mayweather's legacy for the next crop, the next generation of people is, it doesn't matter ultimately how exciting you are in the ring. It's how exciting you are before you get in the ring in order to make that money and get those pay-per-views bought. If and if you can keep doing it, if you're a compelling enough personality or brand to do it, it almost becomes irrelevant, the quality of what's being served. And I mean, this is borne out across capitalism, like, I don't need to have a better hamburger. I just have to have a celebrity advertising it. And you're going to eat the hamburger, even if the person across the street's
Yeah,
hamburger isn't
it's really
better.
not a cynical, crazy take. It's just
No,
realistic.
no. And if you can get away with it from a marketing position, good for you. Like, I mean, you deserve credit for it. If you're talking about, did Riddick Bowe look at Lennox Lewis and think, I really want to cement my legacy by avenging what happened in the Olympics, and I'm going to
Yeah.
beat him because I really
Then he
feel
would have done it.
then he would have done it. And he would have just said, I don't care what the money is. It's worth it to me because of my pride, or whatever. Just the same with Mayweather fighting Pacquiao early on when it was first raised. I think he just went, I think he's juiced. I don't want any part. Like, look what he's doing to the same opponents that I'm fighting. I'll just wait. I can wait. The money is going to be there. I can handle what I'm doing professionally, but you kind of wish it happened when it happened. From a purist standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, it was brilliant what he did. So I think Bowe, nobody, I would never cast any aspersions about him being afraid. He fought very, very tough guys throughout his career, a lot of them. And, having a rematch with Galata after what happened in the first fight, Jesus. I think Lennox's resume bears out somebody who never ducked anybody. I think Lennox firmly believed he was the best fighter in the world during his entire career and wanted to fight any. I think he was desperate to fight Tyson at any point. I think after they sparred, apparently Tyson got the best of him in the first round, and then Lewis really took over. And I think he just thought, I figured out how to deal with that. And And so, yeah, when I look at Lennox's career, he will always have the asterisk of these freakish two losses, but he had the guts to immediately demand rematches with them and
And that
annihilate.
says exactly, that says a lot about his character too, that he
Absolutely.
lost, and he lost badly, and immediately sought out, or perhaps in one case not immediately, but pretty soon after that, sought out a rematch and a way to make it right. And I think that that's, so you kind of alluded to it earlier, and just to kind of put a couple of details on it about the whole trash can thing and why it didn't happen earlier on. So as professionals, right, Lennox Lewis is with Kelly Maloney and kind of running a little bit of the British circuit. And I mean, it's it is what it is. I'm not trying to be rude. You mentioned the Frank Bruno fight. That was kind of a necessary step in the progression of his career. I think Frank Bruno was a 1980s British heavyweight darling that a lot of people liked, but knew had serious pro deficiencies. And so Lennox Lewis defeating him, in the kind of Gary Mason level fighters was important. No disrespect to them, of course, but in order to prove that he was world class level, which he did, but he was on a slightly different path than Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe's path was a little bit more accelerated, a little bit more in terms of being put in front of a U.S. audience. He was just kind of thrust out there a little bit more quickly. And so by the time he defeated Evander Holyfield in the first fight, which was a fantastic, first fight of fantastic trilogy, one of the best trilogies, probably the greatest heavyweight trilogy from an action standpoint, uh, you know, that obviously put Riddick Bowe in the driver's seat. When you're the heavyweight champion, you can demand a lot more things. You can, make different kinds of deals, etc. And like we were just talking about, we want fighters to make as much money as possible, having taken the smallest amount of punishment as possible. That's what we generally want for fighters. But you also see two different mindsets from both Lennox Lewis's heavyweight champion and Riddick Bowe, where with Riddick Bowe and his manager Rock Newman, who was just a total fucking clown. I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't really have any other way. He was a rascal. He was not a good dude. And he was constantly meddling in Riddick Bowe's career, as he should have been as a manager, but he was over meddlesome, doing way too much, drawing attention to himself and becoming part of the story. And so when Riddick Bowe becomes heavyweight champion, and Lennox Lewis obviously is kind of heading in that direction, they set up this somewhat unofficial tournament with I'd have to look. I think it was the WBC. And so Razor Ruddock, Lennox Lewis fight on I think it's October 31st of 1992, I want to say.
Yeah,
And
Halloween.
Lennox Lewis scores almost like a freak knockout. If you watch the fight, it's really strange. Like, not to say that it wasn't coming, because Ruddock was hurt for sure in that moment, but the way that Lewis throws like almost kind of a jab in the middle of his combination, and the jab catches Ruddock just right and just torques his head and knocks him almost clean out. And it's a really strange knockout, and it was unexpected at the time too, that it would end quite like that. A lot of people thought Ruddock was going to give Lewis a whole lot of problems, and that was not the case whatsoever. And so I mean, I think the suggestion then is that, well, Lennox looks so crazy that Bowe didn't want to face him. No, it was just Rock Newman was looking for the most massive portion of the pie that he could get for this whole tournament deal. And yeah, that was basically the result of, instead of just bowing out or doing something, they fucking threw a press conference, Rock Newman and Riddick Bowe, where they took a belt that was a ceremonial belt, not even the real WBC belt, that they had somehow gotten from Evander Holyfield, and they threw it in an actual trash can for the media, and then waited for the media to leave, and then got the trash can back. Or I'm sorry, got the belt out of the trash can.
They're so stupid. No, and it's important to say that this is pre-internet. So in terms of any fighter that was making their name in the UK, basically in the US, nobody knew anything about them unless you were avidly following like
Months
UK
later in the ring,
magazine.
right?
Yeah, or the UK magazines that would come out like even
If you could get
later.
them here. Yeah.
Yeah, because they would come out like, I mean, they came out in Canada and I'd see them and you'd be like, Herbie Hyde, he's undefeated. Is he the greatest heavyweight in the world? I was like, who the hell is Herbie Hyde? I'd never seen
Like, he
him.
lost 2 months ago, you guys. What are you talking about?
Yeah. But you're just sort of like, who is this guy? He looks fantastic in the profile that they have about him. But I'm like, who has he fought? He hasn't fought any Americans. He hasn't fought any, like, not that there were many great Canadian heavyweights, but Ruddick was really good. Obviously, his performance against Tyson was unexpected. How competitive that was gave Tyson a lot of problems. Before the referee played an interesting role. But I think that that's a really important aspect about the where the politics of the sport were at this time, is that Bowe was a much more known quantity in the US who garnered infinitely more attention than Lennox. And Lennox made that choice. Like Lennox, it's not like Lennox only fought in the UK. I think his second fight was in Atlantic City. Like he had the odd fight, but he was not making much of an effort to ingratiate himself to American audiences to maximize his earning power. Bowe was that. Like Bowe was identified, even though he'd lost to Lewis, that kind of became secondary to just, he's from Brownsville, he's going to be the next kind of great heavyweight. Then like the Eddie Futch stuff, like bringing him up to say, I've never worked with anybody like this. And we go, whoa, if he's better than Joe Frazier and he's 6'5" and all of this, maybe like, let's forget the amateurs. Like Tyson was terrible in the amateurs, didn't make any difference to his professional success. Maybe Bowe is going to be exactly the same. So I think that that's a really important angle. Is pre-internet, there was very, very, very little awareness of UK fighters, regardless of how well they were faring. And they were not taken seriously. There was a very dismissive attitude about any kind of achievement or accomplishments that were strictly based in the UK.
And I've had this conversation, I mean, because I'm a fucking nerd who has this kind of conversation recently on the internet. But I mean, I had this conversation recently about the WBO title, because there's question, of course, now they call it the 4-belt era. And a lot of people ask, well, then when did that begin? And there is no hard answer. There honestly is not, because there's not. Like, what in the early 1990s, like the other day I posted a photo of Ray Mercer and I referred to him as a heavyweight contender, and a whole bunch of people jumped on my ass and said, hey, he was a champion. And I'm like, with all due respect, no, he was not. Are you fucking referring to Francesco Damiani as a champion? No. So shut up. That's who he won the fucking title from. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was a lineal champion at the time, and at the time, the WBO belt was not, nobody was going, yeah, if you want to be real champion, you need to get that WBO belt. Nobody said that. And so that was kind of my point. And to your point, and why I bring that up, was because a lot of these fighters who were, they were good on an international level, but they often fought strictly in the UK. A lot of them were going after the WBO titles at the time. Chris Eubank, Nigel Benn, Steve Collins. I mean, of course, that's a convenient trio to look at because they all fought each other. But nonetheless, this was almost across the board, a lot of European fighters. And so, like you were saying, many British fighters just weren't known. You had to read about them, and it was later.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to, as you're talking, track, like Bowe won the WBO title off Herbie Hyde in '95. And I was like, where did Hyde get it? It's Michael Bent. He got it off Michael Bent, who I'm pretty sure took it off Tommy Morrison. Did Morrison get it off Foreman? Or where?
I'm trying to remember. I don't even remember. Well, see, we're not even tracking it because it's not considered important to the lineage. Like, there was an entire actual heavyweight title lineage apart from the WBO belt. And so that's why, it was kind of like when other, you can look at it like this. The fighter makes the belt. I think that's a far easier way to just kind of, simplify it. The fighter makes the belt. And it wasn't until a major fighter or a major heavyweight champion, in this case, came along that held the WBO belt for an extended period of time to make it seem like it was, anything. And even then, it's like, there is no date. There's no date.
No, and nobody took it, especially at that time. Nobody considered it a legitimate title. Like, I mean, nobody looked at Tommy Morrison was like he's the heavyweight champion of the world with his WBO title or Herbie. Like, yeah, it was just an academic kind of thing at the time. I think
Yeah.
it's taken a lot more seriously now, but I mean, it's an interesting counterfactual. So, I mean, if Oliver McCall in '95, yeah, no, sorry, Oliver McCall was in September of '94. If that fight, if Lewis had beat him, then the fight was signed with Bowe for '95 for the beginning of '95. And if I'm looking
Right.
at
The trash can incident was 93 or shortly, maybe shortly after Lewis Ruddock in late 92. But the point is, yeah, that was a couple years earlier. And then they're supposed to fight again. And yeah, that one's kind of on Lennox, unfortunately.
yeah, I think it really is. Because I mean, Bowe is gonna in '95, he's gonna destroy Herbie Hyde, the Jorge Luis Gonzalez fight, and then he's gonna wrap up the trilogy with Holyfield, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. And then we get into the territory of Galata and the tailspin of his career, even though it's crazy because I think he did go on to fight until 2008, fighting, I mean, just fucking nobodies like tomato cans.
Yeah.
Um,
Shameful California commission allowing him to fight fucking, oh God. Yeah.
no, I mean he was it was abundantly clear, even in the first Galata fight, certainly in the second, that he had taken some serious neurological damage from just his speech.
Yeah.
That is not the same guy talking, and and yeah, it's pretty bad. I don't think you see that with Lewis, even though I think Lewis, you could be a worse commentator than Lennox Lewis, but you'd really have to work at it because he is profoundly awful with his insights. Like I think you could have a blindfold and probably get more from what is happening in front of you. I don't know why he's so terrible, but I really, really struggle with him when he's calling fights. Even though George is bad, but at least he's an animated presence that's fun.
Yeah. There's just not a lot to him when he's talking, is the problem. There's not a lot of animation,
No,
That's the issue.
and he gets stuff wrong too. Somebody gets knocked out with a left hook. Oh, what a great right uppercut! And they're like, actually, Lennox, it looked like it was a left hook. Oh, and he watches the replay. Okay, yeah, and then just moves on. Like it's just uncomfortable. You feel bad for him, and then you quite dislike he's getting paid to do it, and somebody qualified is not doing it. But anyway, the reign of Bowe is a very, very small window when he's at his best. And I think he really just had that one great fight in him with Evander to realize his potential to go, wow, this guy is extraordinary. It was sort of his Buster Douglas moment, even though he wasn't an underachiever like Douglas's whole career leading up to it. Bowe, there were a lot of expectations, and suddenly it was like, wow, he could be better than we thought, and we thought he could be pretty damn good. And then he began to put on considerable amounts of weight in between fights. His focus was fucked up. Probably some mental health stuff is contributing to a lot of problems with his family life. I think he abducted his wife or his wife and kids.
Yeah.
Bad stuff. Like he goes in a dark direction. Then he enlists in the army for a very
Yeah,
brief
even
period.
worse. I mean, the Marines, and it was for like a day to like 2 days or something. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, it didn't. Yeah, basic training does not seem like what would be the most fun for him to participate in. Um, but I mean, so I don't really want to talk about the '95 version of him because I think Lennox would destroy him at
he
that
was
period.
going downhill, yeah. And you brought up Eddie Futch, and I think a lot of the issue there is and I'm not blaming Futch, but even Futch himself said that Riddick sparred too much, that he did way too much sparring. And we've seen that from other heavyweights too, and especially James Toney at heavyweight, where he hated to train, loved to spar. And I get it, because I was not saying I was a gym rat, but I was in the gym just long enough to know that, yeah, getting in there, adrenaline, fun, getting kind of hit, etc., and then doing the bags. But in comparison, doing all the other shit, super boring, super fucking boring. After you've done it a few times, after you've done it a few times, it's like, damn, this is some really repetitive shit. So I get it, but that's something we saw from Riddick Bowe. Is apparently, according to Eddie Futch, he did a ton of sparring in the gym, and that'll do it.
Yeah, it'll do it. And I mean, on the other side of the ledger, where Lennox is going after the Oliver McCall loss is, I mean, fight some tune-ups, fight with Justin Fortune. Whew, that is hard to watch. Because if you ever go to Freddie Roach's gym, Justin Fortune is always there, and you're just thinking, this is a little guy. I mean, Justin Fortune is my size. He's 5'10", 200 pounds, and you're just, or 210 or something. Boy, if you ever see Lennox Lewis, even now where he's pushing 60, he is different
He's a
species.
big guy.
Yeah, he's a huge guy. I love the Lennox Lewis fight against Tommy Morrison. I thought that's where I started to really take him seriously as just somebody that could deal with a roided to the gills Morrison and just humiliate him with just how outclassed he was. It was impressive. Not that I'm saying that
Yeah.
Tommy Morrison's the greatest heavyweight ever, but he's a very dangerous heavyweight. Ray Mercer's after that. Then he avenges Oliver McCall in the famous crying fight. Akinwande knocks out Andrew Galata like it's nothing. I mean,
You know,
Galata.
it was when Lennox felt threatened, that's when he performed. Like when he felt like, oh shit, the walls are closing in, he lashed out, and that says something about him.
Yeah, and the way he could do it too, like when he wanted to dunk on people, so, like posterize them with a
Yeah, like
knockout.
I'm going home early tonight. Oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even in '98 when he fought Shannon Briggs, and Briggs put on a very spirited performance. I think Briggs won way more fans losing that fight than he ever had from winning any of his fights, because he took a horrible beating from Lewis. He rocked him in the first round, caught him with the left hook. But I mean, that's the side of Lewis. Or anybody says, oh, he didn't have a chin. He takes a huge shot from a massive puncher like Briggs, also a steroid cheat, as we know. I don't know that he was then, but yeah. But takes a massive shot. And there's a point at the end of that, I think, when he finally stops him, where Lewis takes, I think, 2 or 3 shots. Might just be 2, but they're big shots. It's almost like the guy who used to smoke, that wonderful Nicaraguan fighter who beat
Oh,
Vernon.
Mayorga. Yeah.
Yeah, Mayorga. It's almost like he okay, hit me. Takes the shots, and you see him kind of look at him a certain way, and then I think it was a right, left, right, and just floors Briggs, but almost the gesture of taking the shot willingly in order to just, I'll take your thing, and then you can see how mine feel, was just such a boss move that I was
That
sort of
shit'll
like,
fuck with a fighter's head. Would
yeah,
me.
it was really big. And then, I mean, part of the fucked up thing about Lewis is, I think if he had done better against Evander Holyfield, I think if he'd been able to talk about another steroid cheat, if he'd been able to dispense with him in an iconic way, and this is like Evander Holyfield, I believe, after the Bobby Ches stuff where he looked so fucking terrible. I mean, it's after the Tyson fights too, but like Evander had some fights where he looked really bad. I'm not sure where the James Toney fight figures into that. I think it's in the early 2000s when he fights Toney. But you just thought there's no way that Evander can survive Lewis if he had this much trouble against Bowe in all 3 fights. But, and I'm not saying that Lennox didn't win both of them, but you have a draw in the first one, and then kind of a 116, 112, fairly dominant unanimous victory in the second fight, even though the judging still seems off in that second one because of, I think, the Don King connection. But it was just not what we were hoping. They're fights that were very uninspired, that definitely didn't win him any fans. When there was a real sense, if Lennox can just fucking annihilate Holyfield, we know we have our guy. We know we have like the heavyweight champion. And in the fight after it, Michael Grant, who I think at the time was undefeated, I think a lot of people, I always make the comparison with Deontay Wilder and Michael Grant. I think Michael Grant in today's era would have been a version of Deontay Wilder. They're about the same size. He's a big puncher. He looked great in magazines at the time. I remember watching him in magazines when I was a kid, thinking like, he's even bigger than Bowe and
Yeah,
Lewis.
they're making him bigger now. Holy shit.
Yeah, exactly. It was like he was 6'8" and stuff, and he'd knocked out everybody. He sort of had a Tyson, like an early Tyson record, and Lewis just fucking annihilated him and did it like it was a walk in the park. He had the right demeanor after he'd done it. It wasn't celebrating. It was, of course I would do this to him, where you go, oh yeah, that's the Lennox I've been
Yeah,
looking.
he was like, how dare you think that he was the next me? Like, how
Yes.
dare you?
Yeah.
And
And,
look
and
what I'm going to do. Look what I did to him. You kidding
yeah,
me?
yeah, it was amazing. And then, he beats David Tua again. Not the most inspired performance in terms of it being exciting, like dominant performance, but took zero chances. He definitely recognized.
There was like, I want to say it was either round 2 or round 3, and this was like basically the only moment in the fight. Tua loads up and catches him with a left hook right at the end of the round, and Lennox kind of like barely wobbles to his corner. But then after that, he was like, "No, I'm not fucking around. Let's just jab the fuck out of this guy for the rest of the night." So
Yeah,
that's mostly what he did.
yeah, you're 5'9" with like Rocky Marciano's reach. I'm 6'5" with an 84-inch reach. You shouldn't be able to get to me ever, 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 ever.
Yeah,
So,
after that shot, he was like, "Nah, no, no more. That's it."
and and I mean, to be fair, he does the same thing with Tyson, a completely washed up Mike Tyson. He is terrified of him. He is clearly extraordinarily risk averse in making a statement in that fight until your great imitation of Emmanuel Stewart petitioning, what are you doing?
It's honestly one of the best. Like, just Emmanuel Stewart in general has had some great between rounds, like,
Yeah, he's awesome.
bitching at his fighter sessions. It's awesome. The fuck are you doing? That type of shit. It's like, oh, buddy.
And it's not a Teddy Atlas like, I want to have a soundbite kind of thing. He is induced almost to have a heart attack or like a brain aneurysm from how angry he is at his guy. Like, you have a dead man in front of you and you're giving him a chance. What the fuck are you doing? It's one of the
Teddy.
great moments.
Teddy, you've been knighted. You're here to be knighted by the Queen of England. Tomorrow, it's your coronation. Just saying random shit. He'll just say anything. Like,
anything. Remember 9/11. Remember.
Teddy, it's April. I don't care.
It's 9/11 in my heart every day.
This is your 9/11.
Do it for Staten Island. I'm not from Staten Island. I've never been to Staten Island. It
Teddy,
doesn't
I'm
matter.
from Minnesota. What the fuck?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to conclude this, I mean, let's get to the point here. If they fight when Bowe is at his absolute best, the version that showed up in the first Holyfield fight, who's fucking incredible, gives us one of the great rounds ever, regardless of weight, in that 10th round against Holyfield, against the best version of Lewis. What is the best version of Lewis in your view?
I mean, probably, I would imagine it was probably that's a good question. I would say it's probably a tie between, even though I know it wasn't like an exciting fight, his performance in the first fight against Holyfield, who at the time was, had some bad performances but was still dangerous. We knew was a good performance against the top fighter. And then also, like you said, like the Galata performance would have been a good, or like Franz Botha, both of those guys, top 10 at the time and just destroyed them type of thing. I don't know. That's really tough because in that first fight against Holyfield, Riddick Bowe showed things that I think Lennox Lewis largely didn't really show in his career, like a kind of toughness and resilience that I know he did from fight to fight, but I'm talking about from round to round. Like, we never really saw Lennox Lewis get his fucking ass kicked until like his last fight, and then come back. Like, for the most part, it was like he got blasted and then he came back the next fight and, figured it out, which is great. But Bowe showed a different, like, at that peak, showed a slightly different level of resilience and desire. And I think that might have come out on top against Lennox, even though I think Lennox is better all time.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, resume, this is not a difficult debate or even discussion. I would argue 2001 version of Lennox, after losing to Rahman in the rematch, that guy who came in was sort of like
that's not a bad call too. That's true.
Because that guy reminds me a lot of Roy Jones against Montel Griffin in their
he was mad.
Yeah, he was mad, and the mad version was like, this is the most exciting fighter in the world. Like, this guy could beat anybody in the world, and that
combination was disgusting.
disgusting, and it was totally set up.
and loud.
Yeah, it was shocking. Like when Lewis wanted it, I mean, he goes by the name the Lion, and a lot of times you're like, well, that was not a Lion performance in the fights that you hope for something. But when he did, it was like, yeah, a fucking lion has woken up. And yeah, there's something about that fight, like we're saying with the Roy Jones fight. I remember everything about Roy Jones in terms of why he was so difficult to market is embodied with what he said after beating Montel Griffin in like the most iconic knockout of his career up to that point was, I didn't want to have to do this. And you're like, why not? Because this was fucking amazing against a guy that you had a lot of trouble with in the first one.
And we saw it time and time again too, against various opponents where they'd be on the ropes and blah blah blah, and the ref for some reasons not stopping it, and he's sitting there gesturing like, dude, come on, stop the fight. And then they wouldn't. Then he'd go, fine, bat, and then that was it, and it was like he'd knock him out. And it was like, dude, if you could have done that fucking 4 round, just do that. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But that was also a big part of why, it was a tough sell. Even though in retrospect, Roy is fairly beloved among the hardcore, he never sold well, ever.
No, he was never marketable. Like what are his great pay-per-view fights throughout his
Didn't have one.
No, he didn't. And unequivocally in his prime, which is the same as Floyd's prime, more or less, no debate was ever launched about who was the best pound for pound in their day, let alone all time, and that sort of thing. And as Max Kellerman pointed out, I think quite rightly, he was a 2-1 favorite to beat Mike Tyson after he beat John Ruiz to win that heavyweight title. Like at that time where his stock was and the perception of where he was has changed so demonstrably since, as a result of the horrible knockouts we've seen him suffer, subsequent to narrowly eking out that victory against what's his name that he had the trilogy with ultimately.
Tarver.
Yeah, Tarver, right. So that first fight, he gutted it out, very much like Lennox Lewis did against Klitschko. Similar kind of fight where they were both really tested, really struggling, either not in the best shape or just not the best night that they had, but they gutted it out. And then he just went back to the well with that, and it just, so brutal to watch that. But I think the Lennox that was that motivated against Rahman, his pride was so injured. And again, you'd kind of hope that this is how Bowe felt as a result of the Olympics with Lennox, is I want to avenge it so that there's no discussion about who's the best. Lennox had that fire throughout his career. That's a defining characteristic of his legacy, is if he lost, he never bitched about it. He didn't make excuses. I mean, when he was in South Africa and knocked out, he didn't take the necessary precautions about the training at the right altitude and stuff, how that can affect your oxygen and your stamina. That's real stuff. Like, go visit Mexico City, and like their first day there, you're kind of like, am I suffering a health condition? What's wrong with me? It happens to me every time I go there because the altitude is so powerful and what it does to your system if you're not acclimated to it. He never made any excuses. Just give me the rematch, and then there it is. Exactly what can happen. I made a mistake, but who's the better fighter? Don't kid yourself. I'm leagues above this kind of guy. I don't think that Bowe had that. I think he had it in that one fight to fight a great all-time fighter. He gutted out some difficult periods in that fight, and left us with one of the great fights in heavyweight history. But did we ever see anything close to that again? We saw some of that determination to not be overwhelmed by Galata. But again, is anybody calling Galata a Hall of Fame fighter? No. Very good fighter, elite fighter in his time, but Hall of Fame, not even close. So it's and what did Lennox Lewis do to Galata? Like, just fucking destroy him. So I don't know. I feel like a Lennox who was motivated to just pour it on. We never really saw Bowe get demolished by anybody. I mean, Galata is as close as we saw, and that was a very diminished version of Bowe. But I find it hard to imagine how Bowe could have contended with the size of Lewis. Lewis was going to be way bigger than he was back in the Olympics. And could he take the kind of punishment that Lewis would unleash if he was inclined to fight that way? Do you think that Lewis would have fought in a more conservative way against Bowe, or more aggressive, kind of like he did in the Olympics?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I guess that kind of might determine it. I would imagine that in the pros, especially if he had Manny Stewart with him, if he had Emmanuel Stewart with him, Stewart would probably tell him to, box him for a few rounds and not come out aggressive. But I don't know. Perhaps he also would have perceived a threat and said, "You need to get this guy out of here. Like, let's not have a long night. Let's get him out." And if that's the case, I mean, I don't see a whole lot of heavyweights in history with that version of Lennox Lewis withstanding that. One of the biggest right hands in history,
Yeah,
fantastic jab, and an underrated left hook too. So I mean,
yeah.
I could definitely see the fight going both ways, but I definitely also cannot discount the intangibles that Riddick Bowe showed at his best. Small slice, but during that period.
Yeah, you wonder if Lewis made one mistake, could Bowe capitalize to such a degree that it could turn the tide of the fight? He definitely had the ability to do it. Was Lennox would Lennox show up in condition? Absolutely. Would would Lennox be motivated? Like he's already demonstrated that he would fight to win in the Olympic version, and this is, I think, a much more confident version of Lennox with Stewart in his corner, with the size, as you say, trusting a right hand that anybody he lands it clean on is basically on their back. I don't know. I also just I'm not convinced that Bowe showed a lot of guts fighting a smaller guy in Holyfield.
True.
When he's fighting a guy that's more or less the same size in Galata, 6'4", pretty sturdy, 225, 230. I don't remember his exact weight, but Galata was thick, and threw a lot of punches. Bowe did not look happy to be in there at all. He looked distressed. He looked frustrated. So a really perfectly calibrated Bowe in condition like he was for that first Holyfield fight, I still think is just going to get too discouraged. And I think he's shown with what his legacy is that he's not the most mentally tough guy that we've seen at that elite level.
So twisting your arm before we get out of here. What's your final pick here?
I think Lewis is able to break him down and probably score a mid range knockout, because I think if Bowe gets frustrated and starts taking chances, you make one mistake, you're out with Lewis, with that version of Lewis who's going in for the kill. If they're at their best, if that's what we're talking about, the second ramen fight Lewis, he is trying to land a huge left hook or a huge right hand, and I think Bowe had decent defense, but having more reach where he can land it from the outside even against Bowe, I just think Lennox brings too much to the table to contend with it, especially with what we saw with Galata, like how punching in combination and fighting him to win caused him trouble. I don't see a scenario where Bowe wins that fight unless he gets lucky landing a counter, and I don't know if he lands it.
I know
What about
my camera's glitching for a second there, but whatever. It's all right. We'll close it out without much issue. But you know what? You twist my arm a little bit hard here. I mean, I think I guess the most logical thing to do is probably to go with Lennox Lewis. Even though like I said, it's really tough to go against the intangibles and toughness, the desire and whatnot, even just in a small, one or two fights, whatever, for Riddick Bowe. I think that you just look at the body of work and you see that Lennox Lewis is a fighter who is more likely to figure things out when things go tough. And just in general, he's more likely to figure stuff out. So I'd probably go with Lennox Lewis. I'm not sure if he'd stop him because Bowe is tough. Bowe's
very
got
tough?
a very, very good chin. But I think that you could probably rely on Lennox Lewis to win the fight in the pro ranks.
Yeah, and I mean, if Lennox is able to go in there against Tyson when they're teenagers and deal with that version of Tyson, that elusive, that aggressive, and he said he'd never fought anything like that. He'd never seen anything like that. And by the second round, figure it out. That is something we saw with Lennox throughout his career. Is he could download information and adjust, and he had the tools to adjust to a B game, a C game, a D game if he needed to, and he didn't really need to because he was just so big, so strong, and patient. It, I just think if they fight 10 times, Lewis probably wins eight of them, maybe nine. And other than I think the most unsung heavyweight of that era, I don't know who beats that version of Lewis. I'm speaking obviously to Bobby Chez, who in 1996 fought Holyfield. Nobody can solve this crossword puzzle or this Menza challenge, I think, other than our boy Chez. Or
Well, and ultimately this is the quintessential blame Bobby situation because he's the one who allowed all this to happen, you know?
what you have to do is just let Chez go into the ring in a stolen car with like a blood alcohol level 2.3 at a minimum, and then we see what Lewis can do against him.
No question. That's how you got to do it. You got to set these rules up ahead of time. Everything can be negotiated.
Why not? Why not? And I mean, I don't know what they're fighting. They can fight for the Menza towel so that Lennox can wear that for the rest of his life.
Perfect.
His wife would
Perfect.
appreciate it.
Championship for the bathrobe.
For the Menza bathrobe, come on.
Yep. Well, Bren, dude, I appreciate it, man. It's a good Lennox Lewis Riddick Bowe discussion. Wish the fight would have happened, but the fact that it didn't gave us the opportunity to talk about the fact that it didn't. No, I appreciate it, man. It's a good time.
Blame Bobby.
Hashtag blame Bobby. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Apologize for the last minute video glitch, but whatever. Not a big deal. And if you did listen in via the podcast apps or however it is you listen in, please give us a rating, etc. Leave us a little comment. We appreciate that. And if you watched on YouTube, hello and thank you so much. Subscribe, please, and leave a comment. As far as social media goes, both the Knuckles and Gloves podcast and all of us collectively are on social media. Like, for instance, Twitter. My buddy Brin is on Twitter as Brinicio, Brinicio. Me, Patrick Connor, I'm there as Patrick M. Connor. Say hi. We'll say hi back. Brin, we'll talk soon, bro.
Cool, man.
All right, everybody, take it easy.